Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Tuesday, April 6th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. We're going to chat with him a little bit about what happened last night in the national championship game, but primarily focus on the Masters, this week's golf tournament at Augusta National. Also take a little bit of a look at NASCAR and talk some NHL on today's show. So we'll do everything in a rapid-fire fashion on today's program with Brian. Over at ATS.io, my daily MLB betting article posted for today's action. A big announcement that I've decided that we're going to be tracking the picks in the ATS app. So I talk about downloading the ATS app on every show here, which you can do from the Google Play Store or from the Apple Store. A bet tracker, an odds screen, a stats database. Well, we're using that bet tracker now with the daily MLB picks article. So you can follow my picks. I'm skating tripods in the app. So download that to follow my picks, to track them for that daily article. But you can still read the daily picks and analysis over at ATS.io. Golf, UFC, NASCAR, all that good stuff going on this week. We're still covering that. Got NBA, NHL, all the good things that are going on around the sports betting markets over at the website as well. So make sure you check all of that out. With that, we bring on today's guest. That is Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. And Brian, how's it going today, man?
It is going. Let's put it that way. There's a lot going on, and I'm trying to get it all done because the phone's going off. I am bunkering myself. I can't do it Thursday and Friday, but I mean, I just love the Masters, and they're like, leave me alone. I'm in my own little nirvana.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be very interesting to see how the Masters plays out here. Of course, the last one being played in the month of November. Now we're back in April, so everything in full bloom. I'm sure the grounds will look absolutely beautiful. But before we get to the Masters, I just want to ask you about, what we saw last night in college basketball with Baylor just dominating Gonzaga in that game. They win 86-70. Baylor cuts down the Nets from the NCAA tournament. Pretty surprising outcome, I think, for both you and I. You and I both liked Gonzaga in that game. But just overall, I mean, is there anything that we can take going forward from this weird COVID season to carry over into next college basketball season?
I don't know. Well, yeah. I mean, I think like some teams, I'm a St. Bonaventure fan. I would say I'm really excited for what they're going to be because basically they were the team that played five guys, maybe a sixth guy in desperation mode. But they were all juniors. So that entire team is coming back. So a team like that's going to be really, really good in the Atlantic 10. And I'm sure there are countless teams like that where you can see what they had built. I think you give them credit for fighting their way through a weird season and save the VCU problem in the first round of the tournament. The tournament was terrific. So I think you thank them for giving us something to watch, wager on. And for the most part, it had integrity, and it was all well and good. As for the game last night, I think it was an intangible thing, and we both got it dead wrong, right? To me, said, and I know I had said this to Stevie on my radio show, I said, you can make the case this is one of the biggest letdown spots in the history of sports, getting the miracle shot and finding a way to get by UCLA. I went the other way and said, hey, look, every team that wins this thing somewhere along the way has to survive a game, and that was survival at its best for Gonzaga. And I thought maybe they'd have played with house money, but I think it exacted a physical, mental toll on them. And honestly, the air was just out of the balloon, and Baylor just stepped on their neck, got the big cushion, and then it kind of settled into a game after that. But full marks to not to discount anything Baylor did. Baylor was spectacular. I mean, okay, you want to take something away? It's a guard tournament. Baylor had three great guards, and they all played great.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that it sort of underscores kind of why Gonzaga has had issues deep in the NCAA tournament is that, Baylor's extremely talented. Very, very deep team, but very talented. And Gonzaga just doesn't see high levels of talent throughout most of the season. And they even got a little bit fortunate in the NCAA tournament with the path that they wound up getting to this point in time. And we saw UCLA's athletes play really well with them in that Final Four game. So plenty to carry over for future seasons. I think here, a lot of the stuff we've talked about over the last 2 weeks on ATS Radio certainly does apply here to what we saw in the national championship game, but also what we could see in future regular seasons and future NCAA tournaments as well. All right, Brian, let's do it. It's the Masters at Augusta National. Again, back in its rightful spot in April. Reigning champion Dustin Johnson, your plus 950 favorite. Before we dig into the odds and the specific players here, Augusta National is just such an iconic course. You look at a lot of the guys that have won this tournament, they're all very, very good to elite level golfers, with the exception of the occasional Danny Willett or something like that kind of pops up and is a surprise winner here. But
Trevor Immelman.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are some guys that do kind of stand out a little bit as guys that you wouldn't expect to win this tournament. But with that being said, I mean, what is your approach here for this thing where we've got all these elite level players, a lot of guys, 60 to 1 or lower, have won major golf tournaments before, have won big events, have at least been within striking distance of winning majors in the past, stuff like that. I mean, you really can't go that far down the board in this thing, can you?
Oh yeah, you can get a bomber that will be there with a chance. Yes. I think the way to go is they play the same course every year. And you look, to your point, to the leaderboard, many repeat champions, guys that historically are on the first page of the leaderboard. It's a working knowledge kind of deal here. If your game's okay, but you know where to miss, you can contend if you don't shoot yourself out of the tournament, which is why Jordan Spieth coming in here and actually playing good golf is really compelling, because he's played extremely, extremely well here. But there are many, many others. The other thing, and I would say this to you, Adam, the stuff we talk about on a weekly basis most assuredly applies here, and that's make a few plays on the front end, dive into some props, some group matchups, or things of that nature. But again, Friday, you can jump in and you can cash a ticket. Literally, the year Danny Willett won, I wasn't expecting Jordan Spieth, to rinse it in Rays Creek a few times. But on Friday night, I bet Danny Willett at 40 to 1. So you can still catch a number here by watching the first two rounds and coming back in. I mean, to the point where I got a handful of guys that I'm actually going to go pretty light coming in, and I'm going to really look at this on Friday, because here's the deal. This would be the big story for me. And I just double-checked the weather. We got, what's the difference between isolated thunderstorms and scattered thunderstorms? What's the difference?
I feel like isolated is kind of more, sort of one-off, kind of a supercell that sort of floats through, but scattered is kind of all over the place, where maybe one hits the course and maybe one doesn't.
Well, that would be Saturday. Isolated on Friday. Hot Thursday, sunny and hot on Sunday. Here's what's going to happen, I do believe. But now the rain could be the thing that maybe skews this thought process a little bit if it softens things up. Although this probably has the best sub-air system on any golf course in the world. I think the folks with the green jackets are really ticked off. They played in the fall, different tournament. And it's funny, I think it was Sebastian Munoz, and I forget who, I read the article, I forget who he was playing with. Maybe he was playing with John Rahm. And it was Munoz's first time there. And they're playing during the round, and Rahm told him like halfway through the round, he goes, oh, by the way, everything you think you're learning right now, he said, throw it out. He said, just play the round. He said, this is not how this course plays. That was in the fall. So Dustin Johnson went 20 under par. The Cam Smith, the runner-up, right, he had 4 rounds in the 60s. He had one of the greatest 4 days ever, and it wasn't good enough. They are going to have this course with the defense mechanism. Sunday, they will have to go with the traditional pin placements. They're not going to alter that. They don't want anybody shooting 20 under par, buddy. Let me tell you that. The defense mechanism here, these greens are going to be lightning, and I think along the way, I don't know what day or days in the days leading up to Sunday, some of these pins are going to be in such gnarly spots, and the greens are the defense mechanism for the golf course. I don't think they want 20 under par again. The prop I'm seeing out there, Jeff Sherman does a great job over at the Superbook. He's got the projected winning score at 275.5. So 13 under par would be the winner, and good on him. I think he's all over this. I'm thinking the winning score in this, because there's some guys are going to just play great, but I think the winning score is going to be about 11 under par. I think they are really going to try to get the course's integrity back and not let them go low. I think that could be the compelling story of the Masters.
Well, when we look at Dustin Johnson's win in November, he won by 5 shots. It was the most we've had since Tiger's first green jacket in 1997 when he won by 12. They'd certainly like a lot more drama in this one. And it sounds like you think maybe they do bunch the players up a little bit by using the elements of the course as kind of the way to do that, as the vessel to do that. Before we look at specific players here, specific names, what kind of players do you look for here? I mean, obviously, you've got to be a good ball striker. You've got to be a good putter. It's a well-rounded player that usually wins this kind of tournament. But I know you're not a huge guy in the metrics or the analytics or anything like that. But as far as the types of players that you're looking to back here, are you looking for guys that hit a draw? Are you looking for guys that hit it a long way and can use shorter clubs into these tight pin placements? What's the profile of the player that you look to bet on at Augusta National?
All right, well, DeChambeau doesn't fit any profile, so he's on an island. Let's just throw him out for a second. The rough is not penal here. The water is penal. I mean, if you're in the straw, the rough does not hurt you here. It's, if you get yourself behind trees is where you get yourself. The toughest, like one of the toughest shots on the course is number 7, right? The tee, it's a narrow par 3. It's a nothing birdie. You hit the fairway, it's a birdie hole. But if you're in the rough, double bogeys in play. And then like that stupid hole, nobody talks about number 7. That's a hole that can, win or lose you. It can lose you the tournament. Let's put it that way. The kind of guys you're looking for, the course sets up for guys that play a draw. Lee Trevino, great golfer, couldn't stand Augusta because he played a fade. Think of the guys that have won this thing. Patrick Reed plays a draw. Left-handers, Mike Weir, Phil Mickelson, right?
Bubba Watson.
And Bubba Watson, all right? They play a high, soft fade, and the greens are more receptive to a high, soft fade than they are to a ball that's being turned over on a draw. So the lefties have an advantage. And Bubba Watson's not a throwout by any stretch of the imagination. His form's not hideous. I will throw a grenade out so I don't forget later. A left-hander that's happening to be playing some phenomenal golf right now is in excess of 100-1 is Brian Harman. So I'll just make sure I mention that now so I don't forget. But no, you want guys, and you have to putt. I mean, you got to be a really good putter. Oh, by the way, Jordan Spieth, right? I mean, he can roll the rock as good as anybody. Cam Smith, runner-up last year, one of the best putters that's out there. So, DeChambeau can hit it a gazillion miles. Is the putter working? Dustin Johnson's short game is so good now. That's what he worked on. That's why he ate them alive. The difference between Dustin Johnson, DeChambeau, and Rory McIlroy, they all hit it a mile. Dustin Johnson hits his wedges 8 feet, and DeChambeau runs hot and cold, and McIlroy's wedges are 20 feet away. So, in current form matters, but basically it is set up for someone that plays a right to left ball flight.
And I think that's important to kind of look at that and sort of put together a course profile, because then you can start crossing guys off the list a little bit. You start looking at some of the guys that, maybe do hit their irons really well or their wedges, but as you said, proximity to the hole is important. Can you putt? It's why a guy like, Hideki Matsuyama doesn't have 8 or 10 wins on the PGA Tour yet because he's not a good enough putter. Corey Connors is a guy in phenomenal form right now. Absolutely phenomenal form. I couldn't bet him at 80-1 because I can't trust him to putt well enough on this course. I know the ball striking is there, but these greens will be fast, as you said, which makes proximity to the hole very, very important, because you don't want to be hitting a 20-footer that might roll 25 feet past the hole if you don't read the pace right.
Oh, I would bet you dollars to donuts, say, over the course of 3 days, probably on Sunday, somewhere along the way on that first page of the leaderboard to Tony Finau. Do you think he's going to close the deal?
No.
I mean, right? I mean, you'll watch him miss 3 6-footers on Sunday.
And
But ball striking wise, Finau's going to be right there.
Well, and I think that's an important thing too, is it's really narrative based. And I understand that, but man, I think you got to bet a guy that knows how to win on Sunday. I mean, you don't get a whole lot of first time winners at the Masters because that pressure, you hit amen corner and all of that. I mean, that pressure just completely takes over. I don't know if I would take a guy, who's a great player or playing really well or something like that, that hasn't won a major high stress, asshole puckered kind of event.
Kind of one of the reasons I like Patrick Reed, right? I mean, he goes back there with a vengeance. He's got history there. He's from there, and he doesn't care about anybody but himself and winning golf tournaments. And, he's got that belief. I mean, I think Patrick Reed's a real interesting guy. So I would kind of look at him. I do think Harmon is a guy I'm throwing in from a grenade aspect, and I'm throwing Jason Kokrak in as a long shot just to have something on the front end of this thing. But then you're going to see demeanor, and you're going to watch this tournament start to unfold. I don't disagree, with what DeChambeau's saying, but he's still got to execute it. Because last year when he went there for the first time as Godzilla, it didn't work. But the funny, because I said, well, wait a minute, on 13, this guy hits driver over the trees. He's got a sandwich coming in. It was to the point, Adam, he can't hit driver on 13. If he hits driver on 13, he's put it in Race Creek. So he can throw 3-wood over the trees on 13. He just didn't execute. But there's no reason on the par fives that he's not playing those par fives as par fours. And he's right to say, I get where he's coming from, and it rubbed some people the wrong way. But it's like what he did at the U.S. Open. His putting was unbelievable last year. I mean, if the putter's working and the wedge is not completely off, if he's just flailing away with the wedge, none of it off the tee means a hill of beans. But DeChambeau should be there. He really should.
Well, and like I said, I mean, to that point, Rory's had a bunch of top fives, hasn't finished off a tournament in a long time. Patrick Cantlay, 3-time winner, but the Zozo Championship and the Memorial, the Memorial's obviously on a pretty tough course, but those are not the Masters. Tommy Fleetwood never won a PGA Tour event. Guys that I think, are really skilled, but do have the shorter prices here. I think, again, it is narrative based, but I think you do have to factor that into the equation of, can they finish this? I mean, can a guy like Daniel Berger, great player, tremendous ball striker, one of the better putters of the good ball striking group too, can he finish off a tournament like this at 35-1? What about Paul Casey?
There it is. Boom. I was just going to say you did
really well, but can he finish the Masters? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It's funny. Yep. Excuse me. You just nailed it on Casey. He led this thing a few years back, and it was awful on Sunday. But he plays a right to left ball flight.
Yeah, and that's the question. I mean, some of these guys have the tools. They have all the physical tools. They have all the clubs in the bag that they can hit. But, still, I mean, you talk about the Masters, and you're staring down some of these holes, and it's a challenge on Sunday, to say the least. So, I think that kind of really impacts the way that you sort of handicap this thing, where I think almost instead of looking at guys you want to play on, you look at guys you can kind of cross off and sort of thin the herd a little bit that way.
Absolutely. And that's why I think, watching the first couple of days really matters. Cantlay has yet to win a major, but he didn't lose at Augusta. COVID messed us all up here. But a couple of years ago, on Sunday, he came roaring back, came all the way back, and got the lead. And I forget who, the year's escaping me. It was only a couple of years ago. And then somebody, who was behind him and still had the par 5 to play, got it, and then got a birdie on 16. But Cantlay did what he needed to do to win it. He just got beat. So Cantlay's dangerous at 20-1. Schauffele, I love the kid. And a major's absolutely in his future. Current form right now, nothing special. How about the wild card? I can't even believe he's here. Koepka's at 25-1. 3 weeks removed from knee surgery. I mean, you think you'd be out of your mind to play a guy like that. But look at him. I mean, there's probably no one in better shape on the tour than him if the knee holds up. I mean, if he doesn't come in here off knee surgery, he's 10-1, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's certainly in the low 20s, I would think. I mean, he's one of those guys, a lot like Schauffele, except he's actually won them, where like the big events, he shows up. I mean, he's kind of the Allen Iverson of the PGA Tour, where he doesn't care about practice, doesn't care about, some of those other tournaments he plays because of sponsorship things and stuff like that. He just goes to majors and plays ridiculously well. So I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, I could understand fading him in matchups, thinking that, maybe the knee's not going to hold up. But yeah, he's not the kind of guy I'd want to bet against, in a tournament like this. You think about a guy like Colin Morikawa at 31-1. I mean,
you're driving me crazy. I mean, because we must have drank the same coffee. I'm almost choking to death here. Thank God there's a mute button. But I was just going to say, every time I'm about to get to the next guy, you mention him. I mean, we're on the same page here. Guys don't win this first time out of the box. But, the thing about Morikawa, he just shows up at courses he's never played, and he's fearless. Morikawa is interesting.
I just wonder if he putts well enough. I mean, he might be the best iron player on tour, but does he putt well enough here? Is the putter good enough? And that's the problem is, look, I will say this. I think Jon Rahm wins it. I think at 12-1, Jon Rahm now, the baby is out of the way. That came last weekend, so he doesn't have anything to worry about here. There's no uncertainty. There's no anything with regards to playing this tournament. And he's been close before, and he's such a world-class player. And I guess you could make the case that maybe Jon Rahm hasn't finished off, enough of these big tournaments. But I don't know, man. I sort of feel like with the baby coming, several days in advance of the tournament, it feels like it's Rahm. But at the same time, I mean, 12-1, there's not a lot of meat on that bone. Maybe you bet him Friday night or something like that. But it's really hard for me to get past these elite dudes where we're kind of trying to poke holes in them for a variety of different reasons. But ultimately, I'd be shocked if anyone 40-1, higher than 40-1 wins this thing. I really would.
It's hard to argue with that. I do believe, there are some grenades out there you could take a little flyer on. I think Harman as a lefty comes in really good form. And oh, by the way, if you watch him in the match play, I mean, his putting is spectacular. So Harman's marginally interesting to me. Another guy that's rolling the rock, and I think he's had some success, not winning, but I think he's played well at times. Poulter at 125-1 is another guy that can roll the rock. Leishman's 100-1. He's another guy that has moments and plays really well at Augusta. I would say this to you, and honestly, I'm going to click the button here before we get off. I said for the next 20 years, form or no form, you got to look at Bubba Watson at Augusta because the course is set up for him. Well, he's won it twice, and he's actually playing some decent golf now. He was really good in the match play. 75-1. I mean, you would have thought Bubba Watson would be 25-30-1 the rest of his life there. 75-1 is a ridiculous price, and actually he's in better form now than he's been the last couple of years.
Well, and as always, I mean, make sure you shop around for the best prices here because I'm seeing Bubba Watson at BetMGM at 50-1. He's 90-1 at DraftKings. So make sure you shop around for the best prices. It's critically important. Like I said,
we didn't even mention Lee Westwood. I was waiting for you to throw him. How about this? The unbelievable form and the grit he's shown, and he's been close here before. An older guy at Augusta,
twice,
right? An older guy can win this tournament. I mean, you think of some of the Cabrera, Kenny Perry almost won it. I mean, older guys can fare well here. Jack Nicklaus at 46.
Yeah, I mean, I like Casey to be like a top 5, top 10 guy. And I think that's kind of the way that I'm going to try to attack this. And I know very frustrating for you that you don't really have that option out there in Las Vegas. But look, Casey at 35-1, I may take a small piece of it because he's in pretty good form. He's had a couple of top 10s lately. We talked about it already. His game sets up really well here. I don't know if he can finish it. So finding a plus 550 for a top 5, plus 275 for a top 10, even money for a top 20. those are probably the ways I'm going to attack this, because I think there are a lot of guys that can play well here, but there is a monumental difference between playing well and actually finishing this thing on Sunday. And so that's where the difference kind of lies to me, where I think a guy like Rom could finish it. I think a guy like Justin Thomas, who's gotten better each of his 5 years here in terms of his finish, could finish something like this.
You want the overlay?
Casey probably can't.
I mean, the overlay, it's still not that attractive. He knows how to win. His form's nothing to write home about. But again, it's Augusta, where if you're on the planet, you can go low. I mean, you just can't be all over the place. But it's still, every time he tees it up, he's going for history. Is McIlroy is going for the career Grand Slam. And, you know, at 18-1 for a guy like Rory McIlroy, I know the form's not there, but we've seen golfers find it out of nowhere and get good form. No, isn't that amazing? I mean, no one, and think how deep we are into this thing. And we're just mentioning Rory McIlroy now. That's how weird his form is. We haven't mentioned Justin Thomas. You know, there's maybe the world-class guy in that group who is the guy that can really go low. And honestly, you know, think about that. And okay, Dustin Johnson, great. They were yapping about the Shambo. Hey, Speed's a nice story. Justin Thomas, is the numbers in the tournaments he's racked up at a young age. I mean, he's the nuts, this kid.
I mean, I think back to his performance in the Players in the final round, and every approach shot was a dagger. I mean, it was just absurd to watch how clean that final round was for him. What he did from a strokes gained tee to green department, in that tournament was just outlandish. I mean, it was ridiculous what he did on the weekend, and specifically on Sunday, you know, staring down a win with that massive paycheck, you know, coming off of his grandfather's passing and all of that, very emotional. And just the dude, I mean, I wouldn't even call it flag hunting. It was just legit hole hunting. I mean, it was unbelievable, the final round he put together. And that's the thing. You got to think about that too. Guys that, like we've talked about already, guys that have had the chance, maybe they have the skill set and all of that, but that dude's unflappable. I mean, there's just something about Justin Thomas's mindset that he's unflappable. And I will say this, I'm not betting him at all, and I'm even considering maybe fading him this week, maybe to miss the cut or something like that, fading him in matchups. But the one thing that stood out to me about Jordan Spieth, in his post-round interview on Sunday, he was like, I wanted to play light. He's like, I didn't want to think about it. I just want to come out and, you know, hit my shots and play light and not, you know, get too serious about the whole thing. And he wound up finally finishing one off. But that's the mindset that you have to have. And it's obviously easier said than done. But I think that's the biggest thing about the Masters, the unquantifiable element, sort of the intangible element of the game between the ears. I think on Sunday, all these guys are good, but who wins that game on Sunday? That's what I think you've got to try to figure out here.
Yeah. It's funny, while you're talking, I'm looking it up. I mean, the numbers are actually stupefying. And it is scary how fast time flies. He's 27. Literally the prime. Well, actually, for golfers, the prime of your career is in the low to mid 30s. Your physical prime, I guess, is 27. But Justin Thomas, you know, he's got 14 career wins. He's got a major. He had 5 wins in 2017, 59 top 10 finishes. You know, he really is. He's right there with Dustin Johnson. But when it's all said and done, what kind of numbers does Justin Thomas put up there? And at the end of the day, when we look back on this, he's got to get a green jacket somewhere.
Yeah, he'll get one. I'm not sure if it'll be this one, but I think he'll get one. I think Rahm gets one too. And like I said, Rahm's kind of the guy I like, but, you know, 12-1, it's you know.
So there, by the way, there's something about Spaniards and Augusta, right?
Yeah.
Seve, Olafable, Sergio. I mean, Sergio gets one, right? I mean, we didn't talk about Sergio. His form's not bad. He's coming in here. Guys, there are repeat winners. In some respects, Adam, maybe that's the starting point. Just go look at the list of guys. I think I wrote it down. Is it 18 former champions are playing in this thing? I think it is. this tournament, guys with multiple jackets. Do you go any further than go look at some of the former champions, pick a guy and saddle up to him?
Well, and again, I mean, you think about this course too, and just the perception of this course, the name value that it carries. I mean, it's daunting showing up, I imagine, even as one of the best players in the world, just knowing what happens on this course, the highlights or the lowlights, I guess I should say, of Rays Creek, and, some of those shots down the final 3 holes, 16, 17, and 18 and all that. I mean, it's a daunting golf course, and some guys are probably beaten before they even tee off. So, that's kind of where I'm at with this, starting to think more about the mental handicap of something like this, where I know, and I God love Tony Finau. I hope this guy has tremendous success, wins a bunch of tournaments, but I know, I don't care how good he looks statistically, I can't bet him for the Masters. It doesn't matter what the price is. I can't bet this guy because I know on Sunday he's going to fall apart.
Well, the one thing is, and it's okay, it's cliche, but it's true. The tournament doesn't begin until the back nine on Sunday. Well, it doesn't begin for the top 5 guys, that are turning for home. The majority of the fields got scalded by then. That's the crazy thing is Friday night. You watch Friday night. We'll sit there and go, what a leaderboard. Oh my God, this is great. Blah, 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 blah. By Saturday night, it'll get whittled down to 4 or 5 guys. It happens every year. Saturday's the day they just rip guys' lungs out. Saturday is the day there's going to be carnage out there on moving day. And that's when the cream of the crop, whatever, rises, and they separate themselves from the field. But the back nine on Sunday is where those 4 or 5 guys that are in contention, somebody like Spieth, look at the Tiger won it. You can post a number. You can be several groups ahead. You can post a number. That's what Nicklaus did the year he won it. Tiger, all right, everybody stepped up. Molinari had the lead, hit it in the water. Koepka was in contention, hit it in the water. And, who was the third guy? Finau, I believe. I think it was Finau. They all hit it in the water on 12. And Tiger just shot it, didn't go flag hunting. Tiger went over the bunker, put it in the middle of the green, got a par, and ran out of there. So you can come from off the pace on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, course management is important here too. And that's where you kind of talk about the guys that hit it a long way. I mean, it's all well and good to shorten these holes, but also, angles on that second shot are really, really important too. Guys that have the ball control to, if they're going to miss in a good spot. That's really important when it comes to Augusta National. If you miss, you don't want to be in the trees. You don't want to be in the pine straw or something like that, to where you have no control over what happens with the spin on that approach shot and everything else. So, guys that miss well, I think are important here too. And that was kind of the thing for DeChambeau in November, was that, like you said, when he missed, he didn't miss well. It was a bad miss. It was a bad spot to be in. So
he let his the one thing he's got to guard against, and you got to believe it's really hard, is that if you say he's on 13 and he hits it over the trees and he's got a gap wedge or a 9-iron coming in, and other guys are hitting 4 and 5 irons, what are they doing? They're hitting to the left side of the green, let it feed down to the middle, 2-putt, get your birdie, and get out of there. For DeChambeau, when he says, I'm in here, I can go flag hunting, it's really not the case. Even though you've got a lofted club in your hand, if you go at the flag and you put it in the water, you blew your brains out. So even though you hit it a million miles, you can't adopt that I'm going for the flag all the time. You still have to do what the course dictates you do.
Well, it should be a lot of fun to watch here, to be sure. We threw out, obviously, a ton of names. But, for me, like I said, I think attacking the top 20, the top 5, the top 10 markets would be the way that I'm going to look to go here, because trying to pinpoint the winner in this thing with so many elite world-class players is a challenge. But I think there are a lot of guys that do play well here, but maybe kind of struggle a little bit on Sunday. So I give myself that top 10, top 20 type of cushion, kind of go from there. For Brian, not an option. in Nevada for God knows what reason. Hopefully that changes here sooner
supposedly
rather than later.
by the end of the year. I would just say to you, for sure, I'm going to play Harmon. I'm going to take a little dinky flyer on a Coke rack, just to have a couple of guys in excess of 100 to 1. I mean, it's not that it can't happen. And of those at the top of the list, from a price perspective, I'm looking at Reed. And then I'll play matchups, and on Friday night, I'll really make a decision once I kind of see, where the leaderboard stands. But the beauty of it is, Justin Thomas is 12 to 1 for argument's sake. Adam, if he's 5 or 6 shots back on Friday night, you'll get Justin Thomas at 20 to 1. That's how to bet a guy like, unless you're all in on Rom Thomas or somebody like that, or DeChambeau or DJ, then you dump the lunch bucket on it and run with it. Other than that, you sit there and you wait to get the overlay price on them halfway home.
Well, and I think that's an important angle here too, because as you just talked about, I mean, Saturday is the day where they really try to separate the men from the boys, so to speak, in this field, where they will make things very, very difficult on Saturday, and some guys will fall off. And what invariably happens is, as those guys fall off, the guys that are not, that don't alter their games because of how the course is set up on Saturday, or the guys who don't really care what they're going to do, they're just going to do what they always do, like a Justin Thomas. He might be 6 shots back going into Saturday and then be 2 shots back going into Sunday, because he's the kind of guy that can make up 4 or 5 shots on a Saturday like that, where, as you called it, carnage takes place. So I think that's a really sound and smart strategy from you, Brian.
And in some respects too, Adam, there's something, you're almost better served, like Tiger all those years. I don't think he never went nuts on Thursday. I think it was like 70, right? It was always like the number for Tiger, 70, 71. It was don't shoot yourself out of it. But in some respects, you're better served to be 3, 4, 5 shots back, because it forces you to then be aggressive on the weekend. And that's when you get that rhythm in the groove. You haven't shot yourself out of it, but now I got to push the button. I got to go. When the guys that are at the end, or the guys that are at the top, they start protecting, and that can be pretty ugly. And then all of a sudden somebody catches you, then you got to go again. It's tough to flip that on-off switch. In some respects, you're better positioned to be 3, 4, 5 back into the weekend.
Well, and again, there are a lot of different ways to attack this, a lot of ways to go at this tournament. I'm excited to watch it, excited to see how it all plays out here, to be sure. Over at ATS.io, if you check out our DraftKings Bet $1, Win $100 page, there's a bonus offer for new depositors over at DraftKings. Deposit at least $5 in any of the states that are listed, and you'll be able to get any golfer at 100 to 1 to finish in the top 10. So whichever one you bet with those boosted odds, you can do that this weekend for the Masters. You can read about that over at ATS.io. And Brian, you and I, we talked about it before the show. Neither one of us has really looked at Martinsville yet as far as NASCAR goes. For me, it's all about baseball right now. For you this week, it's all about the Masters. So we won't be doing any NASCAR stuff here for Martinsville. Maybe you'll have a video for us over on our ATS YouTube page as the week goes along. But we did want to finish up the show today talking some hockey. And there are a lot of developments going on right now. Vancouver in a very serious COVID pause. I believe 19 players on the COVID-19 list, apparently having a very bad, some sort of Brazilian variant of COVID-19. So they've wound up having some pretty severe symptoms. I guess, we haven't heard too many details, but sounds like things not very good there.
No, and it wasn't just guys that made the list, Adam. These were guys, they said a number of them were, they got the first order of business, everybody be okay. But they got hit pretty hard. I mean, guys were nauseous, the real bad flu-like symptoms, dehydration. But the problem is this is across the board. It's in excess of 20 people. It's the entire organization. Now, the luxury the league has is these guys are going nowhere fast. but the season's winding down. They had a week built in on the back end of this thing, and they're into that week now. And the problem is, if it happens again somewhere else along the way, I think they'll be okay, but you do run into the deal where points percentage could be the thing that gets teams in and out. They don't want that. The other real problem here is the Canadian border is closed, and the terrifying thing is what they've got there apparently is the Brazilian strain of this thing. And it got into Canada, and the border's closed up there. They've been locked down tighter than a drum more than anybody, and it hits up there. So this is what we're dealing with. It's just not going away, and it's a scary, goofy thing how this is going to shake out the rest of the way. On top of it, the races are starting to heat up. You're in that mode of 18 to 20 games are left in the season. Some pretty good races are going on. The intensity's starting to pick up. But the other problem you got then is with the border. The team that comes out of the north is going to probably have to play their playoff games, their quote-unquote home games at a neutral site in the States. But the nightmare, because of what's going on in Vancouver, it's on the table again, and the league is right now very, very seriously, and the players want no part of it, but they may have no choice. They're looking at a bubble again for the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know, the tough thing here for Vancouver, too, is obviously these games canceled with the players being sick, but you wonder, with that severe of a case, and we've heard about, you know, some of the difficulties, and in fact, you know, I watch Myles Garrett every week for the Browns, who had a case of COVID, a world-class athlete, built like a brick shit house. I mean, that dude is in superior peak physical condition, and he was winded after every play. I mean, he was on snap counts. He was actually largely ineffective for several weeks after he got back. And that's a guy, you know, he's going through practice and all that, but he's playing one game a week. For the Canucks here coming back, if they, you know, do come back from this whole outbreak, I mean, what does this team look like? You know, I mean, are these guys even able to go out there and, you know, log 22, 23 minutes of ice time, something like that? You sort of wonder about that. And, you know, maybe the team won't want to come back. And then what happens with the games that were postponed and everything else? So I you know, maybe they do point percentage to pick the North Division. I don't know if it has to be something blindly across the board.
Well, they're getting a break. They're getting a break. Here's the break they're going to get is the North is basically settled.
Right.
You know what I mean? Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Montreal. Montreal's in fourth, and they've got an 8-point lead over Vancouver, Calgary, and Calgary. And Montreal has games in hand on them. Vancouver and Calgary are not coming back. So the one luxury they'll have, and no one would bat an eye about it and say they're the top four. They were the top four. They're going to be the top four. Even if Vancouver comes back, they're going to be the top four. No, the problem is why with Vancouver specifically, they could maybe say it's a points percentage thing. The playing field's unlevel. It's not like in the West where Vegas is flying to Arizona or going to LA or Anaheim, and in the East, Boston's going to Washington or Pittsburgh or you know, things of that nature. In the North, they've been flying cross country up there. The travel has been so unfair to the teams in the North that on top of it, they're going to go, well, because of the Vancouver situation, make up games with a couple of the teams from the East got to go now fly for a cross country game. That could hurt them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely kind of worth watching here to sort of see how all those dynamics play out. But outside of this North Division here, you know, as you said, the playoff race is kind of taking shape. And like we talked about last week, the top three spots in basically all of the divisions are pretty well decided at this point in time. You know, you're kind of looking at some of those fourth and fifth spots where those last playoff spots are kind of up for grabs. But what else have you been seeing? I mean, is there anything that you're betting on tonight? Anything that you've been betting on here lately that, you know, feel like you still have some value on it?
Tonight specifically?
Just in general. I mean, are there plays that you've noticed, plays that you've been making here?
Yeah, I mean, all year long. I mean, teams play back-to-back games. The first game kind of tends to go over. Second game tends to go under. Certain matchups, Minnesota owns Vegas. Vegas owns St. Louis. The Vegas-St. Louis games feature, you know, they made the total 5.5 in the Vegas-St. Louis game last night. It was 6-1. Vegas has scored 5 or more on these guys in recent memory. I think you're finding like some soft numbers. I would throw this at you. I think you find some soft numbers. The other night, the Sabres were plus 220 against the Rangers. I'm like, at home, I'm like, what? What? I mean, the Sabres were a punchline, right? You know, you and I, you're always saying to me they suck and everything, and you're right. But they had an 18-game losing streak. But Linus Ullmark was not in that. Linus Ullmark, they didn't have an NHL goalie. Linus Ullmark's been back. They should have beat the Flyers the first game plus 280. They blew it, missed the empty netter. Then they came back plus 280 and win 6-1. Then they're plus 230 against the Rangers and beat the Rangers in a shootout. They've got their NHL goalie back. Jersey's lost 3 in a row. They're $1.50 over the Sabres tonight. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's a good number. Jersey at home, maybe a quarter, maybe 30 cents. Jersey can't get out of their own way right now. I think they look at the standings and put a number up. I don't think they look at current form. I don't think they look at backup goalies. I love hockey betting because I think you find numbers that are just askew.
One huge movement tonight. Tampa Bay is going up about 30 cents against Columbus in a road matchup here for Tampa Bay. So line moves still happening out there. And, again, like you said, probably some good betting opportunities.
And honestly, okay, Tampa Bay walks in, steps on their neck. Fine. I would say this. Columbus just got embarrassed against Florida. But if you look at the situational opportunities that are presenting themselves the rest of the way, I mean, you can sit there and say, you look at Columbus specifically, they are 5 points behind Nashville. And, they've got to win out. They got to start going nuts. For whatever reason, Columbus is a matchup nightmare for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay should be a big favorite against everybody, but this is the team that gives them fits. And there was one other one tonight. I don't know if I can find it real quick. I think it's Philadelphia, and I can't stand Philadelphia. I think they're phony. But if you looked at the standings, okay, Philly's playing Boston, correct?
Yes.
All right. Boston's minus $1.30 on the road. And I'm not a believer in Philly. That being said, Philadelphia is in 5th place. They're 3 points behind Boston for 4th to get in, and Boston has 2 games in hand. So you can't say to me that Vigneault, and they don't say to these guys before the game tonight, fellas, the season's over if you lose tonight. This is our playoff game. We're 3 points behind them. They have 2 in hand. If we lose tonight, they're 5 up and have 2 in hand. Our season's toast, and the trade deadline's coming up Monday. If you don't, and I don't believe in Philly, but I'm just saying situationally, they literally have to be looking at this game tonight saying our season is on the line. And that's what you have to look for, is situational opportunities. I don't know that I trust them. But I'm just saying, I'm looking at it going there, seriously saying, we're at home. This is a playoff game. We have to win tonight or we're not in.
A lot of good thoughts across some different sports betting markets here on today's edition of ATS Radio with Brian Blessing. And Brian's work can be found on Sportsbook Radio, on Vegas Hockey Hotline, the Hockey Betting Podcast. What's the best place for everybody to get all that stuff, Brian?
Probably on Twitter at Brian Blessing, and all the goodies are kind of there. We're on the Sports Grid Radio Network Series Channel 204, 2 to 4 Eastern weekdays. In fact, you'll be on with us today and on Thursday this week. Always appreciate you jumping on with us. And Vegas Hockey Hotline, if you're a hockey fan, we get great guests from around the hockey world. That's at kshp.com. There's a listen live function. That's at 1 o'clock Pacific time. Do the Hockey Betting Podcast. You can check that out with Cam Stewart, which is always great fun. And we go through basically all the games. Website there is the hockeybettingpodcast.ca. All over the map, my friend. And, baseball's back up and running, but we got the Masters and the NFL draft's coming. In fact, like I'm sitting here, just got a text from a friend. Taylor Hall's not playing tonight, so that's the tipping point. He could get traded today. the NHL, the trade deadline's coming up on Monday, and that's going to be pretty compelling. I think it's the most impactful trade deadline in any sport where actual guys are difference makers. At the end of the day, the team wins the cup. You go, that trade helped them win the cup. I think the other trade deadlines are a joke, but the NHL one's impactful.
Well, we'll definitely be able to keep up on that stuff. We'll talk about the aftermath of the trade deadline, talk about what we saw on the Masters next week with Brian here on ATS Radio. But make sure you follow Brian on Twitter at Brian Blessing. Check out our ATS YouTube page. I got a lot of good stuff from him there over on that. But Brian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
Have a wonderful day, buddy. We'll talk next week.
There you go. There's Brian Blessing again, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at Brian Blessing. No show on Wednesday. Thursday, we'll do the Bettors Box, my MLB betting podcast. And then next week, Monday, Thursday with the Bettors Box and Brian Blessing segments here on Tuesday. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And I will talk to you again on Thursday.